Swastiastu.
Om Swastiastu.
First of all, thank you very much for the attendance of all distinguished speakers. We have speakers that will also present their opinion or perspective about the civilization. First, let me introduce Mā Archanā from the Anand Ashram Foundation. She will present the topic of understanding the connection between India and Indonesia civilization, along with...
we have to maximize the similarity of our civilization, our way of life, and also we have at the same time to minimize the difference, the distinction.
There is a shloka which clearly shows the Big Bang theory. It clearly shows how from Shunya means nothing, there was an explosion and Brahmand, which is universe, was created. And it describes 4 dimensions, the space, the length, the breadth, and the time. It is all there. And it was written 7000 CE, before CE.
But the most important thing is you discovering yourself. And I call this the greater purpose. You know, if it's about a career, it's about your purpose. But greater purpose is beyond your career, which has a lot to do with Hinduism, which means we serve, seva, in this journey.
Due to the similarities of the culture in both the regions, the name dates to the 18th century, far predating the formation of independent Indonesia. During the Sriwijaya era, many Indonesians studied at Nalanda University in India. The Indian epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, play an important role in Indonesian culture and history, and rare popular amongst Indonesia to this day.
And kita yang berada dalam lingkungan alur ring of fire dan memiliki iklim tropis, ini sebenarnya memiliki kekayaan alam yang luar biasa. Ya.
Yeah, so a few important words come out from here is connecting the world. That means we must go global. Okay, if we Hindus are not global, we will be finished. So globalization is very important, and we have to connect all the Hindus in the world. And
Mā Archanā, the time is yours.
Thank you, Madhya. Senator and President of World Hindu Parishad, Honorable Bapak Dr. Made Mangkupastika, respected panelists, brothers and sisters in Dharma, and of course, when I'm talking about brothers and sisters in Dharma is the youth here who are present for today. I'm so very happy and thankful that I've been invited to give my share of thoughts. But before I would like, I heard that the participants are from all walks of life. So I would like to greet you all with Om Swastiastu, Namaskar, Assalamualaikum, Shalom, Om Namo Buddhaya. I would like to start my presentation. I think there is a slide there, since my topic is about understanding connection between India and Indonesian civilization. Therefore, I took the liberty on naming the title of my presentation as Sanatana Dharma in Indonesia. Why I chose this title itself? Because if we know by now, it's like Indonesia is the largest Muslim population in the whole world, but yet in its everyday life, it can never escape the colors of the Sanatana Dharma. We see it every day. If the slide is there, I would like to show you the first slide. Is it there? Ridwija?
Yeah, let me try to fix it, Ibu Mā Archanā. One moment.
Yeah. Anyways, as I was mentioning about the way of life in Indonesia, it's always been colored by the colorful way of life of the Sanatana Dharma. In my first slide, actually, I was showing a picture of a very interesting commemoration and celebration of the Sudanese New Year's. And this celebration is actually always celebrated like once a year. It is symbolically with the harvesting of the rice, right? And I come from West Java, Sunda, and then this tradition is actually held by the Sunda Wiwitan. And what is very interesting, Wiwitan means the beginning or Sanatan itself. So it is a religious belief, also system of traditional Sundanese, that it venerates the power of nature and the spirit of ancestors. So if we look at that, it is a way of life of the Sanatana Dharma, right? And okay, are we showing something? Right. Yeah, this Sanatana Dharma. Okay, anyways, let me just continue. So it is therefore, even though we live as Muslims or as Christians and other religions, but the everyday life, even in everyday traditions, like when we greet each other with Anjali Mudra, and then in the wedding ceremonies also, it's colored with the traditions and the culture of the ancients, the ancestors. If you look at it, oh, this must be from the Hindu tradition. So it is in the everyday life. And even what's interesting, the Muslims, they celebrate the birth of Muhammad, right? Of the Prophet Muhammad, and it's called and then in Java, right? So that's the first picture I was showing. This is the Tepang Tahun, we call it. It's the New Year's, sorry, Seren Tahun. So this is the New Year of the Sunda Wiwitan. And the procession is with the Naga. So we'll go back to that story later on. And the second slide, please. Next. Next. This is actually, if you see there, woman, no, before that, please. Before that, yes. There's a woman wearing a jilbab, a veil, but then she's also participating in this celebration of Sakaten. So Sakaten, if you see there are these offerings, but actually it is a celebration of the birth of the Prophet Muhammad. Okay, next. Next slide, please. Yeah. So if we talk about the connection between India and Indonesia, it goes back during the Ramayana times. So the connection between the so-called India and Indonesia, why do I say the so-called India and Indonesia? Because there wasn't the term or the name India, Indonesia. So we see the world differently right now. We, as the socio and geopolitical, map now, it's so different what it was before. We name ourselves with boundaries now of countries, but it wasn't how it was seen at a long time ago. Anyway, back to the story of Ramayana. If you remember the story of Ramayana, when Sugriva dispatched his army to Yavadvipa, so Yavadvipa was mentioned in Ramayana. So he dispatched the army to Yavadvipa in search to find Sita. And so where's Yavadvipa? And it is actually where Java is, where the word Java means barley, millet, or seeds, actually. And so it was mentioned in thousands and thousands of years ago. Okay, next. Next slide, please. In here, if the Americans have a hero called Captain America, so Indonesians have it too. we are so proud of our local hero Gatot Kaca. So this connection is there also in Mahabharat times, when the Pandavas were exiled, and then when Bhima met Hidimba. In India it's called Hidimba, but in Indonesia it's called Arimbi, and then they produced a child called Gatot Kaca. And what is so interesting, in India itself, the name Gatot is not famous. I mean, you wouldn't give your son a name of Gatot, but in Indonesia, if you have a son, the name Gatot is so popular because it is a symbol of strength and boldness and courage. So parents would like to have their sons as Gatot, so they name them Gatot Kaca. When we say, but Indonesians are small, look at Gatot Kaca, they're so big. This is the thing with history, and if we look at the different history, there's the yugas, right? So different yugas have also different human morphology. A long time ago, people lived longer, and then they were much, much bigger. And this can be seen if you go to temples in Bali, in Java. The steps are so wide, and you were like thinking, if you go there, why are these steps made so big when we are so small? But because a long time ago, this is how the Indonesians were built. Again, the word Indonesia was not there, right? And what's also interesting with the connection between the so-called India and Indonesia in the Mahabharat, it is mentioned, of course, we know that Rukmini is the wife of Krishna. But Rukmini is not as famous in Indonesia as it is in India. The one that is more famous is actually Jambawati. Why? So we believe that Jambawati, as we know, she is the daughter of Jambuwan, the king, the bear king. So we're thinking, is there any link? Well, I would like to explain this, why the stories of the link between Yavadvipa in Ramayana exists and Mahabharat exists, if we see the next slide. The next slide, please. Because we do have a common heritage, and it all starts with the archaeological evidence that confirms the origin of civilization and even of humanity itself in the Indies. And if we talk about the Indies, it is India and Indonesia. And yes, it is cited in the book by Guruji Anand Krishna. And how is it possible? Our civilization and the land, if we see there in the picture, where the lighter green is actually, that it was actually land, but it is now submerged in the ocean, in the sea. So a long time ago, this was one massive land. This is called the Sindhu Sunda Saraswati civilization. Why it's called Sunda, I will tell you later also. This civilization stretched from the modern day of Afghanistan, Iran, Afghanistan, to the outer limits of Australia. Throughout this land, we all shared the same cultural values. We all shared the same way of life. It is the Sanatana Dharma. Next, please. Right. So this is actually in the quotation, the quotes from Professor Stephen Oppenheimer from the Eden in the East. The common heritage, it is Southeast Asia is the source of the elements of Western civilization. Well, basically, again, it is like stretching. The land was all the same, and we can see it in the next slide. Next slide, please. Right. So why is it called Sund or Sund? So if you look at it, the shape of the map, it is the shape of an elephant trunk. And the word for an elephant trunk is Sonda or Sunda. It is actually a Prakrit language. And that is why it was called Sundaland. Well, the history goes back a long time ago, when, if you are familiar, if you visit Indonesia, of course, if you are visiting in North Sumatra, there is Mount Toba, which is now actually being called Lake Toba. It exploded like 74 years ago. And even, you know, the ash can be still found in now the Bay of Bengal, even up till now. It clouded the skies and the world, and climated just the decrease by 16 degrees centigrade. And it was darkness throughout until 6 years. That's why in this region of Southeast Asia, it was called Tamasek. So that word comes, come from that term. And this is proven in new technologies through satellite pictures. It is not a myth, but it is now proven through satellite pictures. So the thing to understand is, like, we have to change the way we see our history. We have to be aware that the things that we learn right now, even the histories, were given by the colonials, right? And then the word even Indies itself, that was given by the Western. We couldn't look back for thousands, the history of even our own local Indonesian history beyond maybe, I know, 8th century or 7th century, but there were scriptures that were found that was much, much older than those years. But of course, they just need to have more proper studies, yeah, because it has been buried for a long, long time. So our memory is short. That's why we're always like having the feeling of being cut off from our roots. But if we go back and we open up to this whole, the history again, that is being proven now by science, that the civilization was one. That's why we share the same thing. If we talk about Ikat, yeah, Ikat is not only existing in Indonesia, but existing now in so-called India and even in South America. And the way of life over there, you can also find Sanatana Dharma, you know, values over there. Okay, next slide, please. This is ancient Sudanese wisdom. If you read this, it is actually really, the people are very close to nature and worshiping also the ancestors. It says here, the mountains may not be destroyed. The rivers may not be polluted. The ancestral injunction should not be forgotten. Revere trees and revere the forest. Pose no harm to any of them. Otherwise, all living beings shall certainly suffer. What is this teachings? It is Sanatana Dharma teaching. It's the civilization, the Hindu civilization, if so-called Hindu civilization, but it is again the term coined by the Westerns and the Arabs, because they say they couldn't pronounce the word sh, so it became Hindu. It is a civilization, right? It is a civilization. It's a way of life. That is why it's still living, even in Southeast Asia, in Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, and all that. The next slide. And this is the ancient wisdom of Pandara. And it's interesting to see the history of when the Dutch was in Indonesia, before the name Indonesia existed. They called us Hindia, right? And even the Muslim newspaper, it's called Utusan Hindia. And to acknowledge this part of the region, they call it Hindia, and the islands before in our archipelago, it was called Pandara. And all these teachings is there. Of course, we cannot discuss here now, but it is written that exists also some in India. And of course, we have our own, traditional culture. They have our own teachings and local wisdoms of the meaning, like Trihita Karana is there, and Manunggaling Kawula Gusti. It's the same teachings, but just different names. We are always in the same culture, but of course different traditions. Like Mangku Pastika was saying, it is now to emphasize the similarities and stop looking at the differences. And the youth now needs to acknowledge that we were such a big civilization that we discovered many things. Even the law of gravity was discovered by the civilization, not by the West. It's not by, not by the scientists of the West. And so if we look back to history and we feel that what we have achieved before is such and so great, so we will have that confidence in us to also start that in for our future. Since I think my time is up for 15 minutes, it's better to have a discussion later on. And I would like to thank you. And of course, hopefully that we can have a further discussion. Thank you. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Dato', now we are going to the Q&A sessions. Jadi ada sesi pertanyaan. We already have some questions. The first question is from Iwayan Swartika, and I would like to read it. In my opinion, most of our young generations likely more interested in modern West lifestyle than our ancient Sanatana Dharma lifestyle. What all panelists' opinions about this? So I will give the first chance to our lady, to Mā Archanā. Kesempatan pertama dipersilakan kepada Mā Archanā untuk memberikan tanggapan kepada pertanyaan.
Terima kasih. Namaskar, Dato' Parjipji. Pertanyaan ini menarik ya. Saya kasih contoh aja. Ini kan bagaimana? I'm sorry, I'm speaking in Indonesian and English campur ya, campur. Okay, so how do our young generation likely more interested in modern West lifestyle than our ancient Sanatana Dharma lifestyle? But the problem is we have never educated our children about the Sanatana Dharma way of life. See, this is the thing. This is very personal. My daughters are foreigners, right? And of course, they're very accustomed with the Western lifestyle, the youth lifestyle. However, when they came here to Bali, and then they try to they see the way people live, but then they had the opportunity to be introduced and be explained about each and every life activities, like if they see some rituals, if they see some, like, why do you greet each other like that? You know, we've hugged each other and all that. And I had to give the basic understanding about energy. I taught them that if we fold our hands together like this, we're actually respecting one another's energy. And then it is intact. It is good for our health also. It is good also in a, what do you call it, energy-wise. But then, you know, if we hug each other, suppose like now we have COVID, right? What happens? COVID actually a blessing in disguise, because there are many ways, lifestyle that we have to leave behind, and then we adapt to the Sanatani way of lifestyle. Like suppose with greetings, we don't greet each other now with handshakes. We greet each other with Anjali Mudra like this, Namaskar. And so if we give that kind of understanding, they'll be more interested. The problem is we do not give the education and the understanding about the Sanatani way of life. Same with clothings and all that.
And then the second question is, in Hinduism, is it COVID-19 ever exist in our text, and why can we also handle these situations based on our Hinduism value? So is that ever mentioned about this pandemic in our ancient texts or something like that? And how can we prevent the effect of this pandemic based on our Hinduism value? Thank you.
Okay. It's interesting when we're talking about COVID-19. It's not specifically, of course, discussed about COVID-19, but it's about pandemic. It is amazing that in our ancient teachings, they know already how to deal with pandemics. For instance, in Charaka Samhita. Charaka Samhita is the book where when we learn of Ayurveda, and it is called in Janapada Dhamra Vayadhi. And they even tell you specifically of what you're supposed to do. some of the remedies are actually, or the things to do is stay at home. That's the best thing to do. And of course, it is the time to develop the dinacharya. Dinacharya is the daily disciplines, you know, good lifestyle, like waking up in the morning, and to strengthen our agni, our fire, digestive fire. So that's one of them. And then also you can find it in Uttarakhand Ramacharita in the Tulsidas. They also spoke about pandemics. And so it is all there. We don't also talk about COVID-19 pandemics. Even climate change is all discussed there, you know, in the ancient scriptures. So I think that's enough.